The first time I remember anyone referring to another game as a clone was with Doom. Prior to first-person shooter being coined in the mainstream as a genre, just about anything that looked vaguely like id Software's controversial garage masterpiece was simply a Doom clone. Which is funny, considering their previous release, Wolfenstein 3D, had that fast-paced DOS blast in a year prior. However, it didn't have its wild success, becoming the most famous piece of shareware you'd see floating about in the early 90s. Doom was, and still is, one of the best first-person shooters of all time, and it's nearly impossible to look at other games from the era and not see its DNA. Doom set the bar for what these could be, and that loudness went well beyond just video games, directly into news feeds and being blamed for just about everything you can imagine. Doom and its clones have a very specific feel to them. Levels were more open-ended, there was a need to find key cards, dramatic head bobbles. A majority of them used a mix of 2D sprites and 3D environments to create something really far ahead of consoles at the time, even if they tried numerous ports all over the place with mixed results. Shout out to the Sega 32X version's soundtrack. Yeah.
Don't interrupt me.
So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be tackling clones of the game that I should have done first, Doom. The term clone isn't really used with modern games so much unless it's especially egregious, but if you were trying to describe a copycat or a game that might be vaguely like another one, even if it's slightly reductive, you said clone. And wouldn't you know, considering it helped popularize an entire genre, there's a lot of them. What was the first Doom clone you played? Mine would have been Duke Nukem 3D, and way too young because the neighborhood kid knew how to get around his parental lock, which caused a lot of issues. Let's just say it took me a solid 10 years to understand why Duke was handing over money. We've got a whole bunch of Doom clones to get into today, but before we get started, we need to talk about today's sponsor, Factor. If you've been watching this channel and you don't somehow know by now, well, you should. Factor is a delicious pre-prepared meal box that comes straight to your door. It's packed with pre-prepared chef-crafted and dietitian-approved meals that'll be sure to keep any busy person fed and ready to go in 2 minutes. It's all very simple. You just pop open the box, grab yourself one of these, slap it into the oven or microwave, and just wait 2 minutes. Just 2, and then it's mealtime. This week, I was really enjoying the jalapeno line cheddar chicken because, well, anything with a tinge of spice is good to me, but there's tons of options fit for all sorts of diets. Each week, there's 35 different meals that you can pick from supporting keto, calorie smart, vegan, and vegetarian options. There's something for everyone. For the doomy gamer on the go, Factor is pretty handy for anyone who's trying to eat out less. For me, I'm able to spend more time, playing through weird and terrible games for this YouTube channel as opposed to failing miserably and making a nightmare in the kitchen, which is win-win to me. So if you're wanting to move into the spring with some fresh new eats, head on over to factor75.com and use the code Eruption50 to save 50% off your first Factor bucks, as well as free wellness shots for life. You get 2 of these from 3 different flavors for every order as long as you're an active subscriber. That's Eruption50 today. Thanks to Factor for the sponsor, but for now I need to put down lunch and grab a bunch of various apparatuses to see if I could slay demons on it. I think we all knew a guy with a TI-83 calculator that could play Doom, and truly it doesn't get any nerdier than that. Unless you decide to dedicate an entire YouTube channel to talk about games that are 30 plus years old. Doom clones. Can it run Doom? Yes, barely. These days, Doom clones are seen as part of the larger genre known as boomer shooters, which is funny, but also my bones are turning to dust. Modern first-person shooters really began to take shape when Half-Life 1 released, becoming more about hit-sensitive aiming and cinematic experiences as opposed to the quick-paced strafing and blasting demons back into hell action romp that we all know and love. The experience is so unique that even the recent reboot games, 2016 and Eternal, are still miles away from your typical first-person shooter. However, there's nothing quite like the original, besides the sequels, the clones, rip-offs, inspirations, and thousands of fan-made Doom mods released over the last 30 years. Or in this case, its predecessor, Wolfenstein 3D. Obviously, Doom wasn't the first first-person shooter. Several others were beginning to make waves and achieve small bits of success on the shareware scene. Published by Apogee Software, now 3D Realms, Wolfenstein Wolfenstein 3D is often credited as being the godfather of the genre. This isn't technically true, as there were other first-person perspective games out around the time like Catacombs 3D and Battlezone, but Wolfenstein was the first to do it like this. Wolfenstein would spawn its own set of imitators from various developers too. There was Kin's Labyrinth by, well, Ken Silverman, who would go on to write the widely used build engine. Lethal Tender has its obvious inspiration, and anyone who's played Isle of the Dead knows how much it sucks. Then you got something like Blake Stone Aliens of Gold. Released a single week before Doom, Blake Stone was Apogee and Jam Productions' attempt at creating another first-person shooter since id Software was kinda doing their own thing. It's also, as the name implies, about a retro future cartoony British dude named Blake going between space stations and killing people and... Wow, that's a lot more brutal than I thought they'd do. If this looks like Wolfenstein 3D, it's because it's literally on the same engine. This one's okay, same with its sequel, Blake Stone Planet Strike. This actually popped out 1 year later, and Doom's darker, more gritty influence is immediately noticeable. So then, what are some of the first games that were labeled Doom clones? There are a lot that come to mind. Considering just about anything from a first-person perspective with a detailed 2D sprite of a hand and gun was given the shackle, some of the games that people were saying might be laughable. I don't think that anyone would look at, say, System Shock and think, that right there is a Doom clone. Same with Raven Software's Cyclones or Bungie's Marathon, which no one played, because who out there was a Mac gamer? Yeah, that's right. There was a lot of hot garbage in Doom's shadow, a lot of which we'll get into later for sure. I think the first video game that was really looked at positively in this sense was, once again, Apogee Software's Rise of the Triad, which makes sense considering it was initially a follow-up to Wolfenstein and was co-created by Tom Hall, the dude who wrote the original Doom Bible. While the importance of that is up to debate, I think Rise of the Triad did a decent job. ROT, as the cool kids call it, separates itself by doing a few things differently. You get to pick between 5 characters, all of which have different stats. Wanna go fast? Sure. Wanna go really fast? Sure. Triad also decides to lean a bit heavier into the story aspect. There's actual cutscenes with things happening at the beginning and sometimes between levels. Is it important or good? No, not really. You can see why Doom decided to ditch most narrative elements and lean specifically into angry man goes into hell on Mars to kill demons. Although it certainly beats, and then John was a zombie. Most first-person shooters failed to keep up with the rapid-fire pace of Doom in the early to mid-90s, but Rise of the Triad was able to make it work. It keeps your gun smack dab in the center of the screen while throwing all sorts of ridiculous enemies and obstacles at you, although this one leans more into the Apogee special of points and collectibles. Don't forget the difficulty selection where you're gonna get called a little baby man. Speaking of, Rise of the Triad is hard. Even with the newer remaster, which you've mostly seen, the Ludicrous Edition, this whole package is designed to kick the player's ass from start to finish. Enemies group up around every corner. There's various stage hazards that can instantly kill you. Rise of the Triad takes a lot of pleasure in slowing you down as much as possible while maintaining that Apogee sense of humor. You can see them having fun too, as just about every enemy in the game is a digitized actor, a big majority played by developers and friends. If you've ever wanted to see your homies explode into ludicrous gibs, get yourself a job at Apogee. Rise of the Triad is a very solid video game for the time, even if the level design isn't quite up to the new Doom standard. Their insistence on making things have a large vertical element when you can't jump means you're going to be spending a lot of time doing good old-fashioned leaps of faith, which also means instant deaths and restarting the stages from scratch. ROT is a quick save type of game, absolutely a weird product of its time with an interesting identity and, at least to me, the first big Doom clone. This was just the beginning.
No, don't shoot!
The next few years saw a plethora of Doom clones hit the industry. It didn't matter the platform, you could be on PC or even the Sega Genesis, someone was going to be attempting to do the whole thing. So before we get into the unique stuff, I feel like we should talk about the usual suspects. For instance, Heretic. Heretic and its sequel, Hexen, Beyond Heretic, are awesome. They're also two of the most egregious Doom clones out there, considering they use the same engine and were even published by id Software for the brief period where they were doing that. These, alongside Shadowcaster and Cyclones, were all developed by Raven Software, and they were some of the best non-Doom guy shooters you could get from the time. The kicker is that they weren't all about running and gunning. Put that thing away and instead pick you up a wizard's staff,
spellbook and hat, we're cooking with magic. The original Heretic knew exactly what it was. Heck, the original box had a giant "From the publisher of Doom" on the cover. And when it comes to clones, it doesn't get more straightforward than these. I really love Hexen in particular. It uses a 3-class system where all 3 characters have a totally different set of weapons and utilities. You can cast spells as a mage, go full on punchy with a fighter, or do a mix of both with a cleric. For the longest time, Hexen eluded me as I could just only look at the box art in the local rental store for years. But as a grown-ass man, all I can say is play it. Play them both. Heck, pick up Hexen 2 as well. That's more of a quick clone though. Still good. Around the same time, you also had Bungie's Marathon trilogy. If you were a classic Macintosh gamer in the 90s, it was definitely slim pickings in comparison to the much wider library on Windows or even consoles. Visually, these shared a lot with your Dooms and other shooters from the time, but they leaned more into a narrative aspect. When they released, the public reception was like, hey, this is Mac's answer to the popular Windows shareware game, and critical reception reflected that. The standard UI is weird as heck though. It feels like I'm looking at a Windows media player watching a video of someone else playing. The original is unattainable these days, but thankfully Bungie released all the assets as freeware after moving into the Halo Destiny dimensions, so there's a decent open source port you can play on any platform. I don't really know too much about Marathon as I never heard about it until way too late, but I did play a lot of Duke Nukem 3D, and honestly, what's there to say about the Duke? It's one of the premier first-person shooters from the time. It uses that based build engine and runs 100 miles an hour with it. It's mechanically superior to Doom in just about every way and managed to rack up a metric frick ton of sales. The shareware era of PC gaming was crazy for exposure, and to this day, he's been a household name for generations of gamers. Maybe not for all the right reasons, but I'll never not enjoy a stupid one-liner followed up by his theme. Let's rock. Doom saw its influence being shoved onto other platforms too. If you weren't a Windows kind of guy and instead had an Amiga, you could find yourself playing GLOOM. Yeah, they knew what they were doing. GLOOM, GLOOM Deluxe, and GLOOM 3 Ultimate GLOOM. Yes, there's no 2 or 3 very different video games. The original and Deluxe being decent takes on an extremely popular concept. The third being shoved out by a different developer and given the strangest, well, everything. The first GLOOM had a demonic look to it, but the second one is like a freaking joke. Everything is so ugly. The title screen looks like the Resident Evil zombie turning around, and it all looks so cheap in comparison. What is this final boss? What's going on? If you want a more normal Amiga Doom clone, go try Alien Breed 3D instead. Just get used to looking at this little baby screen the entire time. I know a lot of these games had pretty wicked UI design baked into the experience, but this one's on another level. So instead, why don't you play a game where the UI includes feet in your face at all times? Grip on down to the 3DO and pick up yourself a copy of PO'd, as in pissed off, as in let's open up this whole thing with a letter to our in-game fictional mother. Dear Mom, what a crappy day. What a really crappy day.
All I want is a Pepsi, and kid wouldn't get it to me.
PO'd is the debut game of developer AnyChannel, who would go on to make something I've never heard of called Vigilance, which makes sense because I've never heard of this either, but PO'd is wacky. For starters, one of the main enemy types is just a butt, like a walking butt that farts at you. Better knock him dead with a frying pan. What's going on? You're playing as a space cook trying to get revenge, I guess. The entire plot's written out on the front of the PlayStation 1 cover. Friggin' aliens. They hijacked your ship and kidnapped your shipmates. It's enough to get a guy PO'd. I'm glad Chef Boyardee got himself a Doom clone. This one is pretty challenging, so make sure to pick the right difficulty too. I'm decent at video games, I'd like to think, so I gotta pick I'm over 30, I have arthritis in my fingers medium. How'd they know? I can only describe PO'd with one word, and it's bizarre. It's got all of the makings of a Doom clone, but with the absurdity of a 90s experiment gone wrong. I like that consoles were getting their own first-person shooter exclusives away from PC, even if it was the 3DO, and you could tell that this was made for it, but man, there's not 1 second where I look at the screen and think to myself, this is normal. Actually, I just started thinking about Gumby, which is probably the opposite of what you want out of your M-rated game. Man, Gumby was great. As you can tell, the quality level is all over the spectrum. You got classics, you got
ASICs, and whatever PO'd is. So how's about we bring up something that I think is out of this world? Surely, if there was one Doom clone that I would suggest everyone to play, it would be Powerslave.
Oh man, this one's a gem. Powerslave, also exhumed in PAL regions, is not one, but two games. It's a rare case of a Sega Saturn exclusive take on the first-person genre, as well as a more standard Doom clone on MS-DOS. Developed by Lobotomy Software as their only original title, Powerslave tossed together Metroidvania elements alongside a first-person shooter in order to become one of the most unique video games from the era. Heck, simply referring to it as a clone is really underselling what they were doing here. In the console version, you played as a guy who gets stuck in the middle of an ancient Egyptian city called Karnak that's being overrun by a bunch of nonsense. You start with a sword, then you get a gun and more, and try to hack and slash your way out of town. However, you kinda run into King Ramses, a floating head who's telling you what to do, some of which involves grabbing power-ups to change how the entire experience plays. You start bare bones, then you get a higher jump, then you can breathe underwater. You get all kinds of movement and exploration upgrades that'll unlock new paths in earlier levels, and I could not believe this game was from 1996. The MS-DOS version's a lot more straightforward. You pick a direction, pick your weapon, and open fire. You still have the ability to replay levels, but it was unnecessary and set up to be more of a standard action romp. It's still a decent game in its own right, just not the crazy ambitious version of it from the consoles. Now, what happens when you take the two of them and put them together? You get Powerslave Exhumed. This popped out in 2022 by Night Dive Studios, who have been responsible for a bunch of the ports of these old FPSs we've been talking about, and what they put together here is one of the best Doom clone boomer shooters I've ever played. You still have the level exploration intact, the need to upgrade your character to get to new places, but you've also got the tighter, more fast-paced shooting that you would expect from one of these. That's not to say the console ports were lacking, they just weren't this. I love the theme, I love the controls, I love the aesthetic, and what you've got here is one of the most unique games from the mid-90s, and one that I think's been slept on. Do yourself a favor and go play Powerslave Exhumed as soon as possible. It will not disappoint, unless you hate the concept of keycards, in which case, what are you even doing here?
Hey, what's that? Good vibes? Let's ruin them. We've seen some of the good stuff, the popular games and whatnot that you would see in a top 10 list or whatever. However, we're not about that. When I'm talking about Doom clones, I want to see some of the worst, most grimy, unhappy accidents that humanity has ever created. Some of y'all might know about infamous developer Capstone Software.
If you don't know Capstone, I don't blame you. They've been defunct since 1996, which is 200 years in internet time. Before shutting down though, they'd be responsible for a handful of Doom clones, all of which donning less than stellar review scores. There's Operation Body Count, Corridor 7 Alien Invasion, Witch Haven, and Witch Haven 2, some of which were actually using the Wolfenstein 3D engine, notably outdated at this point. One look at some of these, and with the knowledge that Doom is already out, it makes sense why you'd pass it up. It's hard to say no to cutscenes like these. Of this batch, the Witch Haven games are definitely the most interesting. They have RPG elements, and they were also some of the first to use Ken Silverman's build engine, one that later go on to create Duke Nukem 3D, Redneck Rampage, and others we'll get into. Capstone Software's shooters were pretty average to terrible, but there's only one that transcends badness and becomes legendary. I sure hope no one here has played William Shatner's Tech War.
Welcome to Capstone, and prepare to witness the technology of the future today in Tech War, the game of CD-ROM.
Ah yes, Capstone, the pinnacle of entertainment. This has never been more true than with William Shatner's Tech War, an entire set of comics, movies, TV shows, novels, and games, none of which were actually written by William Shatner. Famously ghost-written by the late Ron Gillard, who wrote under a ton of pseudonyms all over the place. Tech War is, well, it's something. Allegedly outlined by Shatner, Tech War is about society, hold on, let me get this right. About a society addicted to psychedelics psychedelic mind-altering drugs called tech, which are microchips you put into your body. So like the war on drugs and also Blade Runner. Tech can create a simulated reality, which is basically the Matrix, and now I'm just sitting here wondering if good old Captain Kirk was a visionary. Probably not, considering society has largely forgotten about the tech war, and reviews from the time reflect that. It's hard not to love the vision of the future from the 80s and 90s though, when bulby CRT monitors were still all the rage. Anyways, take all of that and now shove it into a Doom clone so bad it's barely been spoken about since. That's not to say it's all bad. Tech War does have some decent ideas. Your goal is to take out the tech lords, no, not Tekken players, as seen on the bottom of the main menu here before diving into the Matrix. Yes, it's actually called that in order to stop tech distribution. You're essentially copping out against future drug dealers, except everyone looks like an early Mortal Kombat sprite. One major difference from Doom is the ability to conceal your weapon, which you'll need to do in order to not get attacked by the cops. There's actually various Shatner reactions to how you do the missions, all of which are acting masterpieces.
What can I say? You blew it. If the need weren't so great, I'd have you on the next flight back to the freezer. Not only did you take him down, but you managed to do it without too much bloodshed. Well, what are you waiting for? A medal?
Tech War the game is done up like a giant world map that has you going to different subway stops via a train station, so there's actually a light open world element to the gameplay. It's just, you know, an absolute train wreck in every other way possible. Shooting? Awful. The story? Nonsensical. The controls? Barely passable, even for an MS-DOS Doom clone. Each level and boss you pick also means that you start in the same subway trying to figure out what to do again. It feels like an exercise in patience, just one with MIDI beats ranging from sick to what am I listening to? Sure, there's some cool bits and it's wholly unique, but everything else about this is a drag. In order to change weapons, you have to press a button to conceal your current one and then another to pull it out again. A middleman button just to swap your loadout. It's so ugly to look at, and truthfully, this thing runs like ass. It only looks decent because it took me like 2 hours to try and emulate properly, and I gave up and couldn't take it anymore. Tech War is an interesting experiment, and it's probably something that was made way before its time. I haven't even gotten to the Matrix levels, which are by nature ridiculous and nigh impossible to actually figure out at a first glance. Stuff like this is why boomer shooter became a term, because I just can't figure out what to do naturally. Do I recommend Tech War? Absolutely not. Do I recommend watching a cutscene compilation? Absolutely.
Neural damage. Death. Simple enough.
Well, that was shat. But now it's time to have a little sugar overdose that'll probably lead to some indigestion. I was originally going to talk about this in my Advergames video, but you know what? There's no better time. Developed by these same people who brought us Snow Day, the Gap Kids Quest, and Taco Bell Tasty Temple Challenge would be Mr. Pibb, the interactive game.
Watch it. Thanks, dude.
No, this is not altered. This is simply Mr. Pibb, a Doom clone about getting locked in a school by a mad scientist as all your friends and teachers are turned into zombies. The only way out, chugging down gallons of sugar water and burping in their faces until they're back to normal. Gross? Yes, but hey, that was 1998. What I got here is a shooter that's essentially Silent Hill with burping. Similar to the Taco Bell one, it's a quick romp that you can beat in like 20 minutes or so. It's just got all the check marks of being a poorly made thing. Collision on all objects, preventing burps from passing through? Yep. Slow, chunky movement without any strafing? Oh yeah. Totally broken Z-axis levels, causing me to get stuck outside of bounds and then unable to touch the map, so I just clipped over the entire level, walked up to the final boss and died anyways? That's what I'm talking about. This is the kind of thing your parents watch you play as a kid and think, man, maybe Joe Lieberman's right. Maybe we should ban video games. If you hate the sound of belching, this thing's gonna make you wanna hurl, which is incidentally the name of my next Terabad game, Hurl. That's an acronym for Hardcore Union of Radical Litter Bugs, as in, we gots to throw away the trash. Marketed as a hilarious, non-violent 3D action game, this was developer Deep River Publishing's attempt at creating, well, Doom for the kiddos. It just also happens to suck. You walk around picking up trash for money, then spending that money on items to clean with water balloons, soap, deodorant, which are all weapons for the stinky pigs and ducks, and whatever else they're throwing at me here. You best just hope that things connect and you don't waste all of your ammo with a single press of a button. Great. There's not much to say here. I don't think Hurl, or as it was re-released, Slob Zone 3D, was anyone's childhood. Although I do find it funny that the developer's next game was another first-person shooter called Ashes to Ashes, Feeding the Fires of War. If you went to a Staples or Circuit City in the late 90s, you'd be sure to find all sorts of Doom wannabes. Some great, others some of the worst things I've ever played in my life, like Death Dwellers. Okay, you're looking at the gameplay. Now I want you to imagine the soundtrack. It's probably not this. Check out this default turning speed. This is what the developer wanted it like out of the box. I'm pretty sure I turn faster in my sleep. What you see is what you get with this one. There's little to no variety, but you can, at the very least, parse what is going on the screen. There's a handful of these kinds of releases, both shareware and not, and I'm sure we'll see more over time.
Now let's take it down a step, maybe like 4 or 5. We've talked about games that are kind of bad to really bad, but what about like the worst thing ever? Even further, how about a video game that might give you vertigo? For those who get nauseous easily, you've been warned, The Fortress of Dr. Radiaki.
It is not often when a game makes me so sick I have to stop an entire day's worth of work, but shout out to Future Visionary Incorporated for helping me get there. Also known as DigiFX Interactive, the people behind Harvester, the cult classic point-and-click adventure game. Maybe you know the one.
What do you people want from me? Too late for that, boy.
Dr. Radiaki, on the other hand, is, in my opinion, the opposite of a cult classic. It kinda just sucks. People even thought so at the time. This early Doom clone has you go into the, well, fortress of Dr. Radiaki in order to stop him from destroying the world. It's cartoony, filled with all sorts of outdated stereotypes, and thinks it's hilarious at all times.
The words radiation and Radiaki start with the same letters. UN intelligence is suspicious.
Yeah, I'm sure the UN would announce its surprise attack in the Daily World newspaper. This whole thing is silly. Each level has this crawl of a story happening, each time totally nonsensical. You lick yourself clean as you used to do as a child on the velds of Africa. Yep, sounds about right. When you start playing, everything seems normal-ish. It's just ugly, and there's no proper head bobble, so you move closer to a Windows 95 screensaver than Doom. The problem is that the level design has to be some of the most confusing I've ever seen. The stages are massive and empty. The corners are really tight, and you can barely tell which direction you're going due to a complete lack of interesting landmarks. I just feel like I'm opening doors and smashing people with a bat or sword. Speaking of, the guns feel terrible. You have to manually reload everything with a different key on the keyboard, and enemies fire at you frame 1, so you're better off just getting in their face and swinging. Or so I thought, because it turns out this game is extremely difficult.
Flores. Cuidado. Flores. Flores. Para los muertos.
Thank God and Doom Guy for this era of cheats. Infinite health on. Now I just gotta be able to see things that I interact with, such as this key, which totally blended into the background. How is anyone supposed to see this? Okay, let's talk about vomiting. For some reason, especially in darker environments, due to the speed of movement and how the levels feel, I found myself getting nauseous and fast. Sometime in the middle of the second stage, I had to take a break, and I'd only been going for a few minutes. It turns out that having these low texture backgrounds repeat frequently and the way they interact with the lack of bobble gave me a wild case of vertigo. And to spare y'all, I'm not gonna go any more into that. But Dr. Radiaki joins the ranks of terribly coded VR and Star Wars Flight of the Falcon for games that bodied me physically. Although only Radiaki has this.
Master, we have like an intruder emerging from the sewer.
Did he wipe boots on welcome mat?
No, Doc.
Oh yeah, for some reason the rats are just like a dude talking. Some of the monster sound effects are just a guy making a noise, and that's really my favorite thing about this whole game. Just staring and letting them hit me is a nice break from sitting at the edge of my toilet wanting to die.
Ow. Yeah. Ow.
I don't know what else to say. Don't play the Fortress of Dr. Radiaki unless you have an incredible will for terrible games and an iron stomach. Well,
that sucked. It should come as no surprise that even though we're this far into the video, there's still so many Doom clones that we haven't even scratched the surface of. There's just so many of these things. At the same time, at a certain point, I would just be saying, this is like Doom, but with X, so why not instead we talk about a whole bunch rapid fire style, starting with a little gem simply called Blood.
Another banger from the build engine. Blood is what happens when you replace big future guns with 20th century occult horror, and man does it work. This is actually the first game by Monolith Productions, who you might know from Tron 2.0, Fear, Shadow of War. They've got decades of bangers. Blood was the first, and you probably get that from the instant you hit play and Arise from a Grave. How very altered beast.
Rise from your grave.
I think horror elements go perfectly with the boomer shooter Doom clones. The dark and violent nature works so well with the natural camp of the genre, and despite the goofiness, you just know it's killing time. Sorry, that's actually the name of another 3DO exclusive, Killing Time. Just replace the sprites with more digitized actors.
Iris traveled the Nile sealed in a chest. So goes my heart.
Killing Time is considered one of the best games on the console, and in an era where home platforms were lagging behind the power of PCs, it was a standout. I love that the entire game is a giant single map. It was unique for the time, and even today when most shooters were going for stage-based designs. Unfortunately, it kind of becomes an endless, confusing fetch quest with big ol' empty rooms and spaces, but if you're in the market for some dumb FMVs, look no further. In the mid-90s, when CD technology was really taking off, you'd see more and more developers throw heavier stories and cutscenes into their games, whether or not it was needed. Such was the case with Disruptor. Never heard of this? That's fine. You've probably heard of the developer though, Insomniac Games. Yeah, like Spyro, Ratchet & Clank, Spider-Man, and most importantly, Fuse Insomniac. Back in 1996, they'd released their debut title, Disruptor, and if I'm honest, this one's a hidden gem. Not only was it a Doom clone, not only did it have wacky FMVs, it also had dudes wearing a combination of Power Rangers Zeo and laser tag armor. You gotta love it. Unfortunately, Disruptor was a massive commercial failure for their publisher, Universal Interactive, so their turnaround into being one of PlayStation's premier developers is a great comeback kid story. Check out Disruptor if you ever get the chance. It's got that good polish and has Ratchet influence all over the place. The gun variety's great. There's honestly way too much to handle for a single video. Rogue Entertainment's Strife may not be well known today or yesterday, but it's also one of the most important titles from the era. It combined RPG with FPS to give us a really narrative-heavy first-person shooter, one with player-made choices that affected the story. Sure, maybe a little elementary nowadays, although it's hard not to see the Strife, Deus Ex, Cyberpunk 2077 pipeline. Speaking of modern titles, there's simply way too much to get into. Now that boomer shooters are a whole renaissance genre, you'll see these pop up every few weeks on Steam, most of which are pretty great. Ultra Kill and Dusk speak for themselves, and I'm a huge fan of Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. If you're in the mood for some fast-paced boomin', there's even an official tag on Steam now with hours of releases to sink your teeth into. One of these days I'll play Proteus. It looks sick. One more I gotta bring up real quick though, and it's once again a cult classic, which is funny considering it was developed and published by big-time studio LucasArts. In 1997, we'd get Outlaws, a combination Pizza Hut Taco Bell of LucasArts animation and Doom clone. I'm all about these types of releases exploring totally different settings, and it's bizarre that there only seems to be one set in the Wild West. I mean, the closest we got to this is Redneck Rampage, which is also good, but still. Outlaws is very heavy on its narrative presentation. It's got over 20 minutes of animation done in the same program used for Full Throttle, which also leads to some wacky looking moments.
It's gonna take more than bullets to get what you want, mister.
Sticking with its theme, the gun selection's a lot less over the top. Instead, you've got your more normal rifles, revolvers, and shotguns, each of which you have to manually reload, so the revolver's gotta get 6 individual bullets. I think this is pretty dope actually, as it makes you think before just running into a room filled with dudes. Unfortunately, it is a little short and the level variety is lacking, as a striking majority of this takes place in the desert and desert-like areas, so there's a whole lot of orange and brown to stare at. At the same time,
there really wasn't anything else like this on the market, and when it comes to Doom clones, standing out's a good thing. Even though this one's a little difficult to get running on modern systems, it's worth giving a shot, provided you can get past that old school difficulty. That one didn't work out too well. While I'm here, go play myhouse.wad.
You blast the nasty demons!
One last game for the day, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Before Outlaws, LucasArts would actually put their feet in the Doom clone pool and make something else that, if you've seen the thumbnail, you already know I'm going to talk about. What happens when you take the idea of Doom and combine it with the quickly growing Star Wars extended universe? Well, you get one of the most beloved Star Wars spin-offs of all time, and really freaking good game, Star Wars Dark Forces.
Y'all remember Kyle Katarn, that lovable Jedi Master who'd go on helping old Luke Skywalker run a Jedi Academy? One of the best games from the 6th gen, by the way. Prior to all of that, even before the live-action FMVs of Jedi Knight, he was just a mercenary working for the Rebels who looked like this, moving at the speed and sound of MS-DOS.
A new stormtrooper that can take out a Rebel base that quickly? I should have kept working for the Empire.
Yeah, gotta love that classic MIDI rendition of the Star Wars theme. Star Wars Dark Forces is something I didn't get to try as a kid, mainly because I didn't have a proper PC or PlayStation 1 until way later. Had I known, I'd probably have played it all the dang time. It uses all of the Doom cliches. You've got key cards, you've got a gallery of firearms, most of which feel right at home in the Star Wars canon. Others, not so much. Fusion cutter? What? It looks like I'm holding 4 old-timey cannons. But it works. The biggest difference between this and Doom being the lack of a complete mission trigger, instead leaving it up to the player to end mission whenever the objectives are complete. Then you fly right into another cutscene and level via your totally janky looking spacecraft. It might look silly in 2024, but Dark Forces really embraced this pre-Disney era of Star Wars and gave us something gritty and interesting. It's in the same realm of Shadows of the Empire. It even uses some of the same sound effects. The Jedi and Sith are mysterious, not around as much, and a lot of the Empire's architecture has this sinister feeling about it. Top it off with fun, challenging level design, that familiar IP, and you've got yourself a winner. Also, jumping. As we all know, video games are only good if you can jump. Coming out 2 years after Doom, Dark Forces has a few extra elements tossed in. You can look up and down. There's extra power-ups and level-specific items to help you out. Headlamps, night vision goggles, even different terrain types that mess with your movement. Swimming around kinda sucks, but you can jump for a quick boost. There's a lot of stuff like that. It feels like an advanced version of the groundwork that was laid out before it, and absolutely nails everything that they were doing. Well, unless you're the PlayStation 1 port. Nothing quite like low frame rate, crunchy resolution Doom. I can't see anything. Star Wars Dark Forces isn't very original. It's a mashup of ideas that existed before it while wearing a familiar world famous license. However, it was one of the first to really take this franchise into the 3rd dimension. Unless you count the arcade game, which I don't. Despite being a really dope video game, Dark Forces is actually one of the least talked about entries from its entire franchise. Dark Forces became the Jedi Knight series, as Kyle Katarn is, you guessed it, Force sensitive. This turned into a Quake clone with Dark Forces 2, excuse me, Star Wars Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, its expansion, Mysteries of the Sith, and then finally the Raven Software bonafide 10 out of 10 classic, Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. Yeah, Jedi 2 times in one name because we want to make sure you know you're slinging sabers. All of these games, of course, stemming from what looks like on the outside, a simple Doom clone. If we're looking at legacy, Dark Forces and the whole Jedi Knight franchise definitely went the furthest. Even recently I got an HD remaster by Night Dive Studios, who have been going and revamping a lot of games from this era, including System Shock and Powerslave. Sure, the visuals may be a little off-putting at first, but it's still the same old game, and I think even today, it's something worth playing. It took the clone moniker, rocked it, and gave us an unforgettable adventure. Until Disney bought Star Wars and made it non-canon. Thanks, guys.
Personally shove my blaster down your slimy throat.
So there you have it, the forgotten world of Doom clones wrapped up with a tiny bow despite the fact that we're still missing so many of these. Considering everything was given the title clone back in the 90s, it would be incredibly dumb for me to just call every first-person shooter a clone, so I tried to keep things as close to the source material as possible. It's kind of like how everything became a Half-Life or Call of Duty clone after a while. It's just a silly moniker that doesn't really mean too much, but I think it's a fun phrase. If you were gonna play just one game from this video, I'd go with Star Wars Dark Forces, Powerslave, or Blood. The three of those are really good, really easy to get pretty much anywhere, and you know, you'll just have a good time with them. Or if you're in the mood for some pure Kasuge shat, Tech Wars, just something else. I recommend it if you like bad games. If there's a Doom clone you want me to take a look at in the future, let me know down in the comments, and while I have your attention, if you like the video, give me a subscription. You can also check out today's sponsor, back us over on Patreon, or buy a t-shirt over at the Pixel Empire. It all goes directly into the channel to help me pay someone else to edit these videos, because PO'd is right, I truly have arthritis medium. Anywho, I'm gonna head out, so I've been Austin, and catch you next time when we pay tribute to one of the greats in the only way I know how.
Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Aaron Kwolek, Benna Oswald, Blackfoot Ferret, Blake Thomas, Cheeks, Chris Shelton, Doug Prince, DX Buster, Dylan Snyder, GM Pinks, Hey Quiggles, Idlevice, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Kevin Zanowski, Karen Arter, Rare Find It, Ryan Talbert, and Vox. Thank you all so much for your generous support.
Well, I guess as y'all can tell, I haven't done Suicide Squad yet, but it's gonna be coming real soon.
Another little shout out to all the Patreon supporters. It is because of y'all that we are able to keep this thing going. And I totally understand that money is a hard thing right now, so I cannot thank y'all enough for your support. I will say, if you've noticed, I've had a slightly lighter schedule than usual at the beginning of the year, but I'm planning on going a little bit harder come April. I have a lot of things I want to create and share with y'all, and I hope you like it. I think I want to do more 100% videos as opposed to compilation stuff. I'm getting old. There's more grays in my... Look at all the grays. Okay, I go to bed. Bye-bye.